As U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran continue, a central question remains. Can you bomb a country into regime change?
No, it's fantasy.
No, you cannot bomb a country into regime change. We've never seen it.
It's an open question.
There's no doubt the opening salvo was remarkably successful, killing Iran's supreme leader as well as numerous top military commanders, although much of the regime remains with many replacements ready. As the battle continues, this is a war waged in the air, with bombs and drones and missile strikes, while Trump encourages Iranians to rise up.
When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take.
On the ground, they're on their own. Nader Hashemi teaches Middle East politics at Georgetown University. He says regime change was never really the goal.
The goal, the real goal of the American and Israeli operation is not regime change, but it's actually state collapse. It's to try and break the back of the Iranian state, to make it much weaker.
He says even with the death of the supreme leader, the regime is quite resilient, in part because the military has a vested interest.
The Islamic Republic of Iran did roughly 20 years ago to ensure its survivability. It turned over large parts of the economy to the Revolutionary Guard and their family and friends and a huge network, so that precisely when a moment like this might arrive, those Guard commanders and officers have a lot more to lose.
While the campaign continues,
it's up to Iran to pick your leader. It's not my job. It's not President Trump's job. We're not going to occupy the country.
It has limits. Kelly Grieco looks at U.S. foreign policy at the Stimson Center.
If we actually look at the historical record, we do not have a single example of air power alone bombing a regime into submission.
She says there's what air campaigns can do.
It can go after ballistic missile launchers. It can degrade command and control facilities.
And what they can't.
Air power cannot change politics. It cannot reshape nations.
After the U.S. military invasion of Venezuela, she fears Trump is learning the wrong lessons.
That you can use air power on the cheap to achieve really lofty goals. And what we've been seeing over time is that the goals are getting more expansive.
She points to the bombing of Libya in 2011, when the U.S. coalition, including Canada, attacked Muammar Gaddafi's forces.
We've taken out Libya's air defenses. Gaddafi's forces are no longer advancing across Libya.
This is something that you will hear a lot from Africa, actually. When they look back at the Libya operation in 2011, right, the risks to Western air forces were very small, but it destabilized really the entire continent. Particularly the countries around Libya, but its effects spread, including in just the dispersal of military capabilities, Libyan stockpiles that got in the hands of different actors and spread.
But Behnam Ben Taleblu, the senior director of the Iran program at a Washington think tank, has a different vision for Iran.
Go big or go home. If you're not going to do this right, it may not be worth doing at all.
A much longer air campaign to shatter Iran's security state.
To engage in political targeting, cutting the chain of command and control, and then ultimately drilling down finally against Iran's security forces, making it safer for Iranian protesters to be able to take to the streets en masse.
For that to happen, Hashemi would like to see sanctions, not bombs, that target Iran's elite. What would really need to be in place for the people that we saw out in the streets in December to actually fulfill their vision of the country?
What you basically need is you have to have ripe, social, political, and economic conditions, in Iran, so people can organize and fight this authoritarian regime. But sanctions that don't affect the average citizen allow the Iranian economy and the average citizen to be able to breathe, so that people don't have to worry about day-to-day needs of putting food on the table, and they can start to think about organizing and fighting against this authoritarian regime.
Next, let's bring in Arif Lalani, a former Canadian ambassador to Jordan, Iraq, the UAE, and Afghanistan. He's currently a senior advisor for geopolitical advisory at Strategy Corp, and he's in Lisbon this evening. And Arif, let's start with Iran's leadership. The foreign minister now says Iran could elect a new supreme leader within 1 or 2 days. What are the implications of that?
Well, I guess it remains to be seen who they choose and also whether they get it done in the next 2 or 3 days. I think what you're seeing is the leadership that is surviving and able to function, trying to move forward in a coherent and strong way. So from what I see, most of the choices for the new supreme leader are more or less going to be what we would consider hardliner. So I'm not sure there'll be much change there. And I think the other key figure that is very much, I think, in control of the operations is Mr. Larijani, who runs the National Security Council.
There are high hopes among people within Iran, as far as I know, certainly Canadians with Iranian connections, that there will be significant regime change as a result of what's going on right now. How likely do you think that is?
Well, I think it takes more than removing the leader for regime change. This can't be done just by aerial bombardment and assassinating some leaders. And, the West's record this century of using military intervention for regime change is almost zero. If you think about it, you have Libya, Afghanistan, some would argue Iraq, and even Venezuela, which hasn't really seen regime change. So this takes more than aerial bombardment. This is going to take engagement on the ground and a game plan, which, frankly, I haven't seen yet.
So when you hear the Trump administration say, okay, now it's in the hands of you, the Iranian people, to take action, how do you respond to that?
Well, I worry about that. I think people in the region, many people remember the Kurds in Iraq decades ago when America invaded Iraq. The Iranian people themselves have been down this road before, where Western leaders have told them to come out into the streets and then they haven't been backed up. And I fear very much President Trump even today was saying, I promised you I would help and I fulfilled my pledge, as if it's now over. So I'm very worried. I think what needs to happen in the coming days are a few more things. One, how will the Iranian security and law and order forces respond? They have a choice to make now. Will they protect the regime, or will they protect the nation and side with the people and try and build a new country? Second is what do the Americans do? Regime change requires some engagement, some diplomacy on the ground to try and affect a positive scenario. And I'm not seeing evidence of that as of yet. So I think we have a lot of uncertainty right now and a lot of instability in the region, because as you know, countries in the region have borne the brunt of the retaliation by Iran over the last 2 days.
And speaking of retaliation, what are you expecting to see from Iran's proxy groups in the region?
Well, look, unlike those other cases in Libya and elsewhere, Iran has a tremendous capacity to retaliate, and the Gulf Arab states and Israel have seen that over the last 2 days. I know from people on the ground that there's been a lot of damage in civilian areas, particularly in the United Arab Emirates. I think we're going to see a lot more military action. And I think we have to remember that this is in some ways a challenge between missiles and air defenses. And Iran's missiles are not limitless, they will run out. But neither is the air defense of the Arab states and Israel limitless, and they are going to run out of supplies for air defense.
Just a few seconds left. Donald Trump has now suggested Iran's new leadership wants to negotiate. Do you think that's still an option?
Well, I fear that President Trump is going to try to arrive at one of his famous deals and say that the job is done. And I think that's just going to leave the Iranian people at the short end of this stick. So unless there's a plan, I think this is very much going to be seen as a unilateral gamble rather than a plan.
Arif Lalani, former Canadian ambassador to Jordan, Iraq, the UAE, and Afghanistan, thank you very much.
Thank you.